Hi everyone, I'm Jane at Rockin' Worms. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be moving Red Wiggler breeders into their new home for the next 21 days. Okay, so let's look at one of my breeder bins. Hold on, I gotta put my glasses on. Okay, let's look at one of my breeder bins that has been going for 21 days. All the worms have already died down. Here's a little tail here. You can see somebody who's a little bit slower on the go. All right, so what I did in this bin, per a suggestion of a viewer, is to put in some cantaloupe. Here we go. Put in some cantaloupe slices to see if they would draw the breeders who have been dispersed throughout the bin over to this area, so I would be able to scoop them up quickly and move them into their new bin. So let's see. Oh, look at, here's a cocoon, guys, right there. See it? Beautiful. All right, so these two pieces of cantaloupe were put on the surface of the bin, but you can see I had to dig down to find them. It's one of the things that worms do. They kind of bury their food a little bit because, let's face it, they're dwellers in the soil. So they like to have soil all around. All right, let's see if we, oh, look at this. This is a breeding pair right here. Can you see how they're wrapped around each other? And the clitellums are close to each other. These two are exchanging sperm into their sperm reservoir, and then they'll separate, go their separate ways, and each will use the other's sperm to fertilize their own eggs. And then once the eggs are fertilized, well, they actually start moving up the worm, but the eggs become fertilized, the cocoon develops and goes off the head of the worm to be deposited into the bedding. Isn't that kind of cool and interesting? I find it fascinating. But anyways, this is a breeding pair, so that was fun. All right, let's see if we have a grouping. You know, I wouldn't say, let's move down here. Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't say that cantaloupe worked. Yeah, look at this over here on this end of the bin. If you back up a little bit from the close-up, you can see there's worms all through this bin. So I would not say that the cantaloupe worked as a bait. Now, to be fair to the idea, I did put the cantaloupe in on Friday night, and it's now Sunday night. So perhaps the worms did not have enough time to migrate down to the cantaloupe slices. So a future experiment would be to leave the, or put in the cantaloupe slices maybe a week ahead of time to see if the worms just needed more time to get to them. I don't know. My feeling is, though, however, that the baiting out in my breeder bins doesn't work the same as baiting in a grow out bin would work, because in my breeder bin, I have food distributed all through the bedding, even more than I do in the grow out bins, because I add worm chow and the amendments all through the bedding right up front, so I don't have to go in and disturb. I'm just seeing these two look like they're thinking about getting together. See how the clitellums are next to each other, but they're not yet twined? I think these two are thinking about making a cocoon. And even this one over here. This is the kind of activity that you want to see in your breeder bins, except you don't get a chance to see it very often because, you know, you need to leave them alone so they can breed. And see, even with the light now, they're starting to separate. So I think they were thinking about it, but we interrupted their romantic moment. All right, anyways, let's move back on. So I don't think the baiting idea worked the way we thought it was going to. So what we're going to do is start moving the breeders over to their new home. And I'm going to tell you something about their new home when I put this little handful in the new home. Now what I'm doing is I'm spreading the bedding around a little bit just to see if there's any worms in there. And I also want to try to not pick up any cocoons. If I pick up, you know, a couple, it's fine. You want to follow me over here? If I pick up a couple cocoons, it's fine. I certainly have in the past and it works just fine. All right, so this is the bedding that I made a couple days ago. It is 1 gallon of sifted cow manure, 1 gallon-ish of crushed leaves, and 1 gallon of my pre-composted bedding. And it's, what I want to show you here is how moist it is. If you watched that video, you saw how very wet I was making the bedding. And you can still see how damp it is. Let me do a squeeze test. Ready? See, that's really wet. Okay, that's 100% wet. But it's okay for the breeder bins because look it, there's no standing water. Let's go down to this corner. Can you get the camera down to this corner as I pull it back? See, there's no standing water in this bin. So even though the moisture is very high, it's not going to be a problem. And in addition, this bin will only continue to dry out over the next 21 days as it functions as a breeder bin. So starting a little bit wet and letting it dry down, not to bone dry, of course, but just dry down, will work just fine. Okay, so what I need is another bin. Wasn't prepared for that. Another bin, because this is where I'm going to put my overs right now, which isn't really technically overs, it's the bedding with the cocoons in it, because this is going to become my nursery bin. All right, so I'm going to start picking out worms very quickly and moving them to their new bedding. I don't want to get too many big clumps because, again, I just want to keep down any number of cocoons I pick up by accident. Okay, I have about 600 breeders in this bin, and it takes me probably 35 to 45 minutes to go through this many worms and pick them out. Oh, see, like here a cocoon came along, so I'm just gonna, move that to the side. Okay, so it takes me about 35 to 45 minutes to separate out this many worms. Now I am sure this looks good. And into the new bin, I'm gonna dump this out. Okay, I'm sure you don't wanna watch me do this for 35 minutes. So I'm gonna just do a couple more handfuls so you can see how I do it. Okay, so I prefer, see that one's skinny down, and we're gonna pick him up and I'm gonna show you what I do to catch any worms that do skinny down through the mesh of this 1/4 inch. This is a 1/4 inch mesh that I'm using on top because I do want to keep most of the bedding up here. I'm not sifting the bedding. I'm just grabbing the worms. Hold on a second. Look at these guys, they're beautiful. If I do come across a breeding pair, I just pick them up together. Okay, so what I want to show you here, oh, I can see I have a couple more worms. Wait a minute. Take off the extra bedding there. Just, again, trying to keep down the number of cocoons I bring along by accident. You can still see lots of cocoons in here. This is great. They're doing their job. All right, I think this might be it on the top. Nope, I saw one. Okay, here's another cocoon that came along. I just dropped that off the side of my hand. I probably should have put in a smaller handful. Sometimes smaller handfuls to work through work better than a big handful like I did. Now, the worms dive down pretty fast from the light because they haven't seen a lot of light in 21 days. So they're like, hey, what's going on here? We don't like this. So they're in a big rush to get away from the light. So what I do, knowing that the worms are going to dive down through the 1/4 inch mesh, let me just get this out of my hand. I don't want to squish anybody. I put my finest mesh, which is the 1/20th that comes with the sifter set, down here to catch any worms that do go through. This is just a little hard with my one hand. So let's change hands like I just did. And good, no problem. So just catching any worms that do escape. Oop, and one went all the way down. So there it goes. Just makes it easier to get them off of this screen up here at my height than all the way down in the bottom of the pan. Okay, we're going to do one more handful. And then we're going to move on to moving breeders that I already sifted out and counted last night, and in anticipation of doing this video. So you can see a whole bunch of breeders at one time going into their new home. Let's see. Okay. Want to. Okay, these two. Nope. I thought these two might be hooked up. I'm just gonna let him go down. It'll be easier to get him off of the next. Okay, so here's the handful. I'm just gonna go through, knock off some of the extra bedding, and good to go. Those worms are going to dive down again pretty quickly because they do not like the light to begin with, and then they haven't seen it in a long time, so they're even perhaps more sensitive to it. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now, since you get the idea of how I separate out my breeders, to put them into a new bin. If you do your breeder separation differently, please comment below. I'd love to hear how you do it. I'd like to also hear if baiting out your breeders is something that you've done and how it's worked for you. Did you have to put in the bait food like a week ahead of time or a couple days ahead of time? What worked best? Because for me, doing it about 2 days ahead of time didn't seem to give me the results I was hoping for. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give myself a little working space here while you watch those worms dive. And we're going to look at those worms already separated. here we go here. All right, so this is a small bin that came out of a big bin, my big standard bin. And I separated these out yesterday. So there are just breeders in here. I put the cantaloupe in here just to see what it would do, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. But it's food. It'll go into, somebody's stuck on the paper. Get them off. Okay, it'll go into the breeder bin. Or I'm sorry, I'm gonna put it into a grow out bin. Okay, let me get another bin that I prepared. Okay, so this is again a fresh breeder bin. It has the 1 gallon of sifted cow manure. It has the gallon of pre-composted bedding that I made with the indoor pre-composting method. These sticks are from the leaves. So actually, it has 1 gallon of leaves. So I want to talk to you for just a second about the leaves. I ran out of dried leaves that I had picked up when I visited my daughter a couple months ago. And I live in Southeast Florida. Deciduous trees are not very common. So I basically picked up the dry leaves in my yard that I found, but I had to use some greener leaves that were off of dead branches, but they were still greener. You can see some of these leaves still are green to kind of, make up my gallon. So I was wondering whether these leaves, because they were greener, would heat up the bin, because heating up the bin beyond 95 degrees is not what we want. The red wigglers are not happy above 95 degrees. And what I found is, in this case, with the mix I did, this bin only heated up to 86 degrees maximum. So that's well within the acceptable range, the temperature range for red wigglers. So I feel very comfortable that the breeders can go into this bin and be perfectly fine. You once again see how moist this is. This one's less moist than the other one, but still very much so. Okay, so this is the breeders that I picked out yesterday, sifted out yesterday. There's 515 in here. Ready, set, go. Let's see what we get. This is 515 breeders. The bedding they're in is also brand new, pre-composted bedding. So just a little bit more additional bedding than the initial 1 gallon. So this is great. So what these guys are gonna do is they're gonna dive down, make themselves at home, and start breeding for the next 21 days. Fantastic. All right, let's put the lid on them, get them to bed, and say goodnight. This newspaper is going to be need to be replaced soon. There we go. I'll put on a new sheet later in the week, but this is good for them for now. All right, they are all done and happy in their new home, and we'll see them in 21 days when we'll start the cycle over again. All right, well, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate your time watching. Please think about liking and subscribing to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And I am yours in the dirt, Jane.